This is the Limitless Leadership Lounge, where Coach and John learn along with you from some of the world's most decorated leaders. Recently promoted, let's sharpen the saw together.
It's time to grow. Welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge. I'm John Goehring, joined as always by Coach Jim Johnson, and we got another coach on today, branded well as usual. He's got the orange on, which I love, and we're going to talk about growth. We're going to talk about leadership and life and business, as well as the importance of coaching. Coach Q is here with us. Coach Jim Johnson, we're going to try not to get confused here. We got a couple coaches in the house. Tell us a little bit about Coach Q, and let's dive in.
Yeah, I had the pleasure to get introduced to Coach Q, and I really had a great conversation with him. We're really looking forward to have him on the podcast. Let me share a little bit of background. Coach Q is a former Davidson men's basketball player. I played for Coach McKillop that I'm familiar with, and I'm thinking I'm going to ask him a question about that. Played professionally for a while with the Los Angeles Clippers. He's now a professional certified coach. He's a growth time coach, which we'll get into his book. He's a leadership expert helping Gen Z and millennial professionals step into confidence, clarity, and impact. Quinn resides in Austin, Texas, and he's written an awesome book called Growth Time for our YouTube. I just flashed it in there. It is a fable and it's wonderfully done. It's got a lot of leadership insights. So without further ado, Coach Q and Quinn, I'll probably mix those two up as we go through. Welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Hey, thanks, Coach Jim. Thanks, John. I'm just excited and grateful you had me on. I love your audience. I love that you guys are mission movers. I love that you're reaching the next generation. My heart, my passion is the zillennial, that Gen Z and millennial combined, and how they're so passionate and purposeful, and how they coaching them through their life story and their leadership growth. It's just amazing. It's just where my heart resides. So I'm glad to be on. I hope we can offer some awesome value for those that are listening. And at the end of it, you take away one little nugget or two little nuggets that moves you further along to the mission and goals you have for your life. So thank you, Jim. Thank you, John, for having me on. Excited to dig in.
Sounds great. We talk about mission, and my genesis in creating this podcast and then having John and Dr. Ramon Cream was because I got fired at 25 years old as a head coach, and I thought I knew everything about coaching, and boy, did I not. And so in reflection, I want to give back to young emerging leaders like you do. So thank you very much. We're looking forward to I'm going to start right out. I'm going to take you back to Davidson. And Coach Q, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but Coach McKillop was a great coach. And I'm going to say maybe you were the second best player you ever coached because he coached this guy named Steph Curry. And I can't put you a bet above him. But I'm just curious, can you tell us a story or a lesson you learned from Coach McKillop? Because I know he had a really good career at Davidson.
Yeah, Coach was an awesome coach to play for. He was transformational in my experience in life and journey. And it was very interesting. I recently was back at Davidson, watched a game with him. We chopped it up for a good couple hours. And he's just a family-driven, coach-driven, team-driven community, which was phenomenal. But what I took most from Coach Killip was as I was there, I was a class that came in that helped transform and change that program. So in essence, Coach Jim, we paved the way for Steph Curry to exist, right? And so in that journey, he went from losing to a transformation of we started winning when my class, there was 5 people he recruited that came in, we started to change the dynamic of that program. But in that journey, Coach also went through a transformation. So transformation is possible, and his leadership went through a transformation. So from my freshman year to a sophomore year, there was a marked change or shift in Coach. And what he did our sophomore year, which we eventually won 22 games, which was a breakthrough year. We lost at a last second buzzer to go to the NCAA tournament, which was heartbreaking. We ended up going to the NIT. But he shifted into value-driven coaching. And value-driven coaching and value-driven leadership are key components. So we went to a code, we went to a creed, and it was care, commitment, and trust. We called it in the order TCC, trust, care, commitment. And so they were value-driven, and he would instill that into us as a culture. So really you held people accountable, not for whether they didn't make a play or did make a play, or whether they made a mistake, but it was all elevated against the standard of the values. And I find that so transferable to when I got out into my career and professional world, done playing basketball and into the corporate culture, is value driven is important. And having your values clearly defined and then holding people to the standard of those values was a game changer in terms of leadership and what I really took away from his story. His shift and transformation, he was at his mid 40s at that point. Anyone can change and shift and grow into leadership, and the impact it has on culture and team, and great results came from it. So that was probably the biggest identifier. We have some crazy stories and funny stories, but we really can't bring them up on the podcast here today, Coach Jim.
Tell us a time, Coach Q, about when you were playing at Davidson. Tell us a story of maybe a moment that helped transform you into the leader that you became on the court and then later after your basketball career now off the court.
Yeah, I think in college, I'll be clear, in college, even though I was maybe a top player in the team, I really wrestled with my confidence and I really wrestled with self-doubt. And I was trying to find myself at the same time trying to become a good basketball player. And those are tough. Like even in the professional world, when you're wrestling with self-doubt, when you have this kind of imposter syndrome, when you just don't have a deep layer of belief in yourself to a degree, you put on a lot of different masks and you try to do a lot of different things to cover up. So I wrestled with that story quite a bit throughout my college career. My breakthroughs came after college in terms of my personal growth and development. But I can distinctly remember something that was impactful at Davidson was a journey during my junior year. And in my junior year, we were a roller coaster. We had this team that was projected to be top of the conference, crush it. And that really didn't get materialized to my senior year. We dominated our senior year. We had the second largest victory compared to Kentucky, who eventually won the national championship.
Wow.
We were blowing teams out. But our junior year was this changing year, and it was changing for me because I was like a roller coaster. And if we performed well, I felt great. If we didn't, and in that story, I couldn't get past me and I couldn't get past myself. And I remember having a coach sit me down. He's the assistant coach at the time. He said, look, at the core of it, Quinn, you can't play for your dad. You can't play for yourself. You've got to play for the bigger team and the bigger picture. And it really shifted me. It was like my focus can't be on me. It can't be on these ghosts I'm chasing to please people. It's got to focus on what the mission of the team was. And really the core of the mission of the team, like any performance-based business that people are listening on, is to win, is to get results. So in that journey, I started to shift my junior year and it got me out of a funk. It got me into thinking that my mindset when I approach this game is how can I best help my team win? And anything that would come in during the game in my mindset or disappointment or I make a bad play, shift it out. How do I help my team right now to win? Whether that's in sports terms, it's do I rebound well? Do I focus on my defense? Do I make plays? Do I need to be more aggressive on offense? Where do I fit in to help my team win and not to make myself feel good? And by and large, when you feel like you're focused on the mission, and this is for young leaders out there, where we can get very self-absorbed, very self-focused, and then we get very down and condemning ourselves and frustrated and hard on ourselves is the terminology we use a lot. Man, it short circuits, number one, our growth, but our ability to really impact the mission we're trying to move. So I think that was a pretty defining moment and realization for me in my time at basketball.
Well, Quinn, I'm going to delve deeper because I'm big into mission, both as a personal mission statement and as building a team or business mission statement. I'm curious because I know when I looked through your wonderful book, you talked about some questions and helping people come up with their mission statement. You actually talk, so can you talk about helping people discover their personal mission? And then if you can delve in also, how do you create a mission for some kind of organization, whether it's a basketball team or a business? So
Yeah, I think the journey for me of getting mission focused really took some time of growth and development. And I look at mission focus and it's connected into the power of you, which is the first section of Growth Time, the book, is about getting clear and getting clarity. And we wrestle with that as people. Like we tend to want to achieve goals or achieve attainment, and we want to achieve positions or ranks. And there's a shaky ground when we do that. Underneath that, you've got to be mission focused, and the mission is greater than the vision because your vision, what you're going to do in life, whether that's a position, a goal, a business, a career position, it's going to change. But the mission is going to be a stabilizer. And so it was a bumpy journey through my 20s to get clarity on my mission. And It was really when I was 30, in my early 30s, and I was already just starting off in a bigger leadership role at the point in my life, that there was a reference to Simon Sinek and Understand Your Why. And a lot of people in this audience, if they're, I'm assuming they're going to be into personal growth or development, that's why they're on this call and they're looking for that edge or that elevation. They take that deep dive. And I took that deep dive. And in getting clarity on that, it took me about 45 days. I wrestled with it. I wrestled with power words, I call them. And so that'll be a marker I'll come back to. But there's certain power words that really bring strength to our mind, to our soul, that begin to elevate our mission. And so my mission at that point became pretty clear: grow and develop leaders' lives through impactful coaching, training, and education. So that becomes like an anchor. And when I look at part of my mission in life is to empower mission movers and to grow confidence in that next generation and to grow an unshakable confidence where anything's possible. It's a anchor. It's an identity anchor. So when days are tough, when things are struggling, when I don't feel like I'm moving as fast as I want to go, or I can't reach the level I think I get to, I feel like people are holding me back to the vision I'm trying to reach, I go back to that mission driven moment and I reflect on that. I'll speak it out. Look, get centered, Quinn. You're here to grow and develop leaders' lives through impactful coaching and education. Center your days around that. And that's an anchor. And sometimes you got to come back to an anchor because your shift will want to drink. Hopefully it doesn't drink. Your shift will want to, the ship will want to shift. I'll work on that. But in that, I think that's powerful. To answer your next thought with it, Coach Jim and John, is how do you find that? Gosh, that's the journey what I coach people through in the Power of You, which is that first section of life in the book. Because you got to get a notion of where your gifts and your talents are, but the motivator behind that. The motivator moves the mission. And if you're not clear on the motivator, it reduces the strength and confidence of leadership you have. So whether at a personal level or an organizational leadership level, if you're not clear on the mission and you can't clearly speak to that mission, and the words in there aren't power words that become identifiable to you and your soul, your ship will start to kind of drift. Your team will start to drift because you got people centered on the mission. And it's really evident, as you all know, like when you look at stats and research and what's out with the Gallup polls and Harris polls, man, there's a disconnected work environment out there. You got something 70% of people that are disengaged at their work. That's like the mark of failure for any space. And that's across the board. It's not unique. And part of that journey is the next generation, my Zillennial fam and peeps, they're looking to connect towards mission-driven companies. They want to connect with a bigger purpose. It's not okay to do your job generation. It's, hey, how is this creating impact? It's the influencer generation. So they want to create impact. So from a higher level of organization, not connecting people to the mission is a miss. But really, it starts with the personal level. If you're not clear on you, you don't have strong convictions, your confidence meter's down. And I went through that journey as far as trying to grow in that capacity. And having coached now for 5 years and thousands of sessions, I can see that the impact it has. And I know you value this quite a bit, Coach Jim, when you talk about mission as one of your 6 principles, which I loved your book too. It was really powerful, really awesome. I love that story. It's critical you develop that, but it takes work. It's a growth gap. And when the next generation, the millennials, understand or clear on their growth gap and they jump into it, confidence goes up, things are possible, results happen, success happens. It's a game changer.
I gotta dive into one more question for your time at Davidson. You mentioned that anchor, and that's such a good takeaway for our young and emerging leaders, the anchor. And what is your anchor? But when you're playing at a school like Davidson, it's fascinating to me how it works in college basketball, where you have these smaller schools. Obviously, Davidson's a large school, but compared to the power conference schools, Davidson, say, is a smaller school. And so you're competing against other smaller schools in your conference. And you go through this whole year of competition. And then at the end, you have a tournament. And it comes down to that one game to get to the NCAA tournament, no matter how the rest of the season went. So what it all comes down to is that last game, which is fascinating to me. So under pressure, that's when the leader's job really starts, right? How does a good leader stick to their anchor under that kind of immense pressure?
Well, John, I'll tell you, I'm not offended that you said we're a little lower as far as on the totem pole of sports,
I'm trying
because I
not
would
to
agree.
offend you.
We weren't a power confidence, and you framed that so well, but I get it. We weren't the big ball player, but that's good because that's the story I identify with. And it's the story of the underdog where you've got a lot of these emerging leaders, these people that are taking the next step. They're in mid-level management, like entry-level management, but they're thinking, how do I get that next step, that next level? And I identify with that. So the underdog story, I'm all about it. That's why I coach that audience. I'm not an executive coach. I didn't choose to go that path because I'm staying narrow in my focus with it. But leaders stepping up in the moment, it's not when the moment happens, it's the preparation before the moment. So the preparation before the moment is what causes you to rise up in difficult situations. So you're always going to get your growth time through failures and disappointments. You're going to get your growth time. Like I mentioned, just speaking to the basketball world, our failure was my junior year. We ran into the disease of me, what I would call, and bring this up in growth time, the pride ego virus, the self-centered focus, going for mine, and we ran into that. Our senior year transformed. So we had to go through this transformation journey of our junior year to realize under pressure, we broke and we cratered because we weren't anchored in the bigger picture. We weren't anchored in what we're trying to accomplish. We weren't prepared for it. Our mindset wasn't right. And so the journey I coach through a lot with leaders and with business owners is mindset changes behavior. So if you could write anything down, if you're listening, write this down. Mindset changes behavior. And as you write it down, just reflect on any shift or change you've made in your entire life, whether it was fitness related, well being related, relationship related, leadership changes, or how you influence people. Anything you've changed your behavior in, your mindset changed first. Mindset changes behavior. But to be prepared for that, prepared to win or to handle adverse situations, we've got to walk in the strength of a mindset that'll prepare us for the result we want. So I saw that happen in our college years. Like I mentioned, our senior year, we went 24-2, rolled through it, had some great wins. It was a great experience our senior year.
Yeah, mindset changes behavior. I want you to, if that's going to resonate with you and that's going to resonate with someone, share that with somebody you know right now. Mindset changes behavior, and send them this episode because that's such a good takeaway.
Yeah, great thought. Quinn, how about, can you take us through a little bit of a story about your coaching now? You don't have to share who the person is, like what you did, what are you doing to help people, and maybe share a success story. We like to hear those.
Yeah, there's two frames with it. I kind of a couple buckets I coach through. There's definitely a component where I rely heavily on life coaching, where I'm coaching people through vision, their mission, their goals, pivots in their career, changes they want to make. And there's that space of understanding how to navigate life skills so they can move towards a powerful mission and break through belief barriers. They can break through limiting beliefs. They can gain greater control of themselves and self-manage themselves to success so they can fulfill their goals and missions. So that's one segment. I also coach a high degree of business owners that are small business owners. They're working through strategy, operating systems, processes, and things that help their business succeed. And then I do quite a bit of this leadership coaching, which is more relevant to where we are coaching to this audience from. As far as the leadership capacity, when you're looking through the lens of how do we build up leaders and how do we grow leaders, and like a story of it, working with someone in the corporate culture, and their journey was they were getting some friction within the people they led. And you're right, I'll preserve their name. But in that, they were having some friction and they were getting pushback on their leadership. And it was a situation where their subordinates or the people they were managing or leading were frustrated. And a lot of that was rising up. So what we coached through a lot was emotional intelligence, EQ. And we got into the journey of their soft skills in terms of leadership and emotional awareness and emotional strength and emotional capacity, because it tied into the story of how he was effectively leading those people. And the journey for a lot was, first of all, as a leader, and I find this consistent among young leaders, is that they're not sure of their identity as a leader. And so their identity as leader, how do you lead? And if you ask most young leaders that, if you're thinking about in the call, how do I lead? Or what's my leadership style? Most on the call are going to go, I lead by example. Or most thinking through it is, I set the pace. I'm a pace setter. But the journey we coached this particular individual through that created a great shift and change in the way he led was the identity of being a coach leader. So if you look at Daniel Goleman and his research, I love it. There's 6 different fundamental styles of leadership, and each one has value at different times they're used. But being emotionally intelligent, which one to use offers the most value. And a coach leader, by far, as a definition, is the most impactful for sustained growth. So switching the way we looked at it and having him become self-aware that as a coach leader, he's always coaching through obstacles and barriers. Shift how he interacted with his team, became emotionally intelligently aware of where he was lacking or coming up short, which in this story, he was not always present with his team. So you talk about the leader who's multitasking, the leader who's always thinking forward out, and they're not present with the one they're with. And then cues and behaviors and different ways to address that growth gap became very impactful for this corporate leader, in essence, how to navigate his leadership at a higher level and how to be the best version of his leadership. So that's small, but those shifts create major impact. And coaching through that really shifted him as a person. And it also, which I love, I'm a legacy guy in essence, is I like to see the impact it has in your relationships with your people and your kids and your family and what that does, because it shifted how he interacted too with people at his home and his kid. And so those things are all transferable, which is the beautiful part of coaching. So I know that was a little long-winded space, but I'm trying to give you the biggest framework, especially for those who are listening, that says, hey, I may have some growth gaps. If this is a growth gap, how do I improve in it? How do I take steps to grow through that? And that's the journey you're on to emerge and grow to be the most effective leader in your work, in your mission, and your family. And a lot of this kind of concepts that I coach through, they're covered in the leadership section of Growth Time, Coach Jim and John. So I coach through fundamental, what I call principles, mindsets, and plays to run as a coach in Growth Time. So I support that as well as far as helping people not just identify growth gaps, but man, blow through them, get some gains, get some strength, muscle up. Let's go.
I'm a podcast junkie. Obviously, I'm very proud of our podcast, but I listen to a lot of podcasts because I just can't get enough about learning about leadership. And it was interesting being a basketball coach for a long time that one of the podcasts I listened to just recently talked about Greg Popovich at San Antonio. And he had a great career, but from the outside, he's very gruff. He was very hard on his players. And you thought, geez, how does he do that? Because he was there a long time. And if it wasn't for health, he probably still would be coaching. But one of the things the person brought up was that when he did research, is Popovich had these beautiful team dinners where they just got away from everything else. I kid leaders, you got to be the CQA, the chief question asker. And he really built relationships, because that's something I try to teach leaders is, you can be very hard and demanding, but boy, they better know that you care about them and you want to know about them. And that's something I really learned about Greg Popovich. Really good at what you're talking about with the EQ. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, let's dive into the book, Growth Time. It's different than a lot of typical leadership, nonfiction types of books. Tell us why Growth Time is different and how it can still help us grow.
Growth Time's written as a coaching fable. And so when you read a lot of like life or story or leadership books, you tend to have principles, and principles can be repetitive or ideas can be repetitive, and we tend to tune them out. But most people, when they listen to this podcast, they'll remember maybe a story that was told and they'll identify with it. And then they'll internalize it and say, how can I apply that to my life? We internalize stories. And so Growth Time is a fable and is a story. And within it, it's got really practical like sections to pause and get into your growth time. So it's not like a fluff. It's more like a message and a resource and tools to help people grow. But it's written as a story because it's a character who's trying to find himself. He's a former fledgling, say, professional athlete. And in his journey, he's trying to find himself, his confidence. And he's also trying to figure out how to navigate through his life story. And so it takes this character at different places where he identifies growth gaps through different villages. And as he stops at these different villages, he gets clarity on where his growth gap is and then the work that needs to go into addressing that growth gap. So the stories in the villages he visits, and there's three fundamental kind of growth zones or fundamental growth places he visits in the life section of growth time. And there's three fundamentals in leadership. So it really creates an ABC 1, 2, 3 pattern. That's how the next generation of the millennials work. Give it to me 1, 2, 3, simple, clear. How do I grow through life so I could show up better in leadership? And how does my leadership advance so I could show up and feel very confident in life that, man, no matter what life throws at me or what mountain I have to go climb, I can get there. I can do it. So it's the story version of it that I think identifies with people. So if the story of Exitville, which is the second component of his life journey, of how to navigate Exitville, and don't want to give it all away because I'm hoping you go grab the book and get into your growth time. But in Exitville, he wrestles with beliefs and how do limiting beliefs, empowering beliefs, which I call enemies and allies, really work in your story and how to become aware of them so you can break through and continue to navigate your mission and your growth story. So if you recall, you may forget about, oh, limiting beliefs, empowering beliefs, but if you say Exitville, okay, yeah, I remember that story in growth time. I remember what Exitville is about. I identify with it because I'm about to walk out on my dream. I'm about to walk out on my goals. I get emotional there, about to walk out on my mission. I'm not going to fulfill everything God's called and purpose for my life, and I can't get stuck in Exitville. And here's the traps that happens in Exitville. And so that's the space of where I think the context of growth time is resonating with a lot of people because it's story based, but it's got practical, clear stop points where you get into your growth and resources to get into your growth so that you can keep navigating and climbing the mountain you're called to climb.
Yeah, I want to second again. I thoroughly enjoyed your book because it had a great story with so many golden nuggets about leadership, both personal and building teams. And I want to dig in a little deeper because one of the things I really emphasize, I do a presentation on how to build championship team culture. And one of the things I really emphasize to the people I'm talking to is one-on-one meetings. And you talk about how to run a more productive one-on-one meeting, because I think it's something often leaders know about, but they neglect. So I want you to talk about what you feel about in one-on-one meetings and some advice on how they can be more productive.
Yeah, one on one. It's like a basketball game, right, Jen? Like tee it up, throw me the ball, let's go at it one on one. But what I found in my personal story when I was leading and managing people, and I operated health club gyms for those who are on. I eventually became a mid-senior level manager for 24 Hour Fitness, which at the time was an industry giant. But what I did is I grew in leadership and capacity there. But the journey was, the transformational part was, what does an effective one-on-one conversation look like? And most say they know, to your point, need to have them, but they're not doing them, and you lose all sense of traction because most will understand a one-on-one to look like, hey, how was your day? Let me check in with you. How are you doing? Are you feeling okay? How's your pulse? How's your anxiety meter? How are you feeling about life? And those are good questions that maybe you want to ask people, but they're not focused on the performance and the goals of the mission. So it's like this space of understanding personal relationship and directional relationship within the context of a one-on-one. And what I work through, even with business owners now, how to have effective one-on-ones. And the framework of it is start with the goal. What was the goals? What goals do you agree on or align on? I talk about this in the Power to the People, which is the first section of leadership, is ownership is one of the primary purposes, principles of good leadership. Lots been written about it, some great books out there, but from the context of how do you create ownership? And ownership has a pathway to create it. And you need a certain mindset on what you're specifically looking into to create ownership. So the journey that you would coach through, as I call it AAA. This is Coach Qism, right? It's like AAA. Your cars break down, things are off the side of load. The biggest thing to do is call AAA and get your ownership game on. So in the one-on-one, you really work through the first A. How do you align on alignment to the goals and the purpose that person's trying to achieve? Let's align on it. Let's align to make sure we're very clear about from what you want and I want, what are the goals that we're going to work through from this one-on-one to the next one-on-one. And so once we get alignment on what those goals are and we connect on them, we both agree they're going to help the goals of the vision of the business. Awesome. All right, now let's go work on the second A, which is attitude. And the attitude's about your mindset. What's our mindset going into this? Can we achieve it? What are potential obstacles or barriers that we may run into? And how are we going to kind of work through those? So we get our attitude in terms of connected, okay? And then we describe the specific actions that must happen. And we get very specific. Maybe you're on the call and you're familiar with the term SMART in terms of goal setting. It's powerful. SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, reachable, time bound. I know I said them fast, but you got ChatGPT. Go get into it again. But in that, what are the actions that you take after it? And in the one-on-one, if there's a connection point, it's not just like a directive and you're working together as a coach and a leader, you create ownership for that person to take out of that one-on-one and then go move into meaningful action that will cause a change or result. And then it's real easy. If that takes place in your next one-on-one, hey, how did it go? What worked? What didn't work? And why? And then the journey for a lot of practical layers that I experience and coach to is, hey, look, what do we need to start doing? What do we need to stop doing? What do we need to continue doing? So those are a lot of practical spaces in the one-on-one that you would share. But as far as stories on it, Jim, man, I can remember my first one-on-ones that really trying to narrow down, and they were a hot mess. Without the name of the person, I remember sitting down, having a conversation with them. How you feeling? How you thinking? What do you think's going to happen? Where do you think you're going to go? What are your goals? And it was all over the map. And I left that thinking, okay, that's pretty decent. Let's just see what comes out of it. Nothing really happened. No change, no results. I wasn't an effective coach in that moment. And what I get? Poor results. Nothing changed. And I'm sitting here scratching my head. I'm energetic, I'm enthusiastic, I'm motivating them. And all that turned into like nothing. I'm like, man, I got to figure something out here, Jim. And so it took me a while, but like most of us that are in a spot to coach, we're trying to fast forward our learning curve to others so that they don't go through the pain, but more importantly, they go there faster, further. You're going to go through pain either way, let's call it. There's going to be growth pains, but you go there faster, further because you got the tools and the resources to do it. But yeah, that was a rough one-on-one. You took me back, man. That was a twitch moment for me.
It's funny, leader as a teacher. I was a big follower of the late Jim Rohn, and he always used to say, he's talked about the importance of teaching before motivation. And he said, because if you motivate an idiot, you have a motivated idiot.
I love that. Hey, Coach Q. So you talked about a lot about personal growth, and we know doctors need doctors, therapists need therapists, coaches need coaches. Who are some of your influences, whether it be people that you work directly with, or even just books that you've read, podcasts that you've listened to, who have helped you on your personal growth journey?
Yeah, I think a couple people. I think of coaching mentors that I've had in the business professional setting. And I've had some good ones and I've had some bad ones. And if you're listening, you know it. Like the first thing you remember is your bad leaders. And you
Yeah,
remember the bad leaders and you remember the
true.
burn marks, I call them, right? We have our culture, work culture has two things. It's got the burn and the burnout. So you're dealing with the burn that people experience inside the workplace, and then that creates burnout. And one of my particular leaders, his name was Steve Ford. So when you give affirmations, you can call names out. So in that, he was actually an overseer. He was at the regional level, and I took the opportunity to be a mid-senior level a manager under him. And he exemplified what I knew I needed to continue to grow into is a coach leader and coaching and leading at a higher level and how to really ask powerful questions and not always think I needed to provide the answers. And the other space I really learned from him as a coach and as a leader was sometimes saying less equals more. So say more with less. Let that sit for a second, right? Say more with less. And so those growth spaces, he was a tremendous leader as a kind of a coach or leader, a mentor that helped me through that. I can also remember, which is a defining moment in my personal journey, COVID 2020 was a massive crisis for me. It was a career crisis. It was a personal crisis. I was navigating right before COVID hit, just the unfortunate, painful, unexpected process of a family breakup and divorce. It was brutal. And I also was on furlough at that point. Things shut down. Everyone remembers that, or we choose to forget it. But it shut down. And eventually, the company I'd worked for went through a BK, reorganized, but they closed the market down that I ran. And so my job got eliminated. I was, vetted to stay in Austin and not leave. And you seek support. And I was navigating what's my next step look like. And I worked with a coach. And that coach was very transformational in the way I thought or envisioned what could be possible or what that next step was. Fortunately, I had a lot of confidence because I knew that mission statement I addressed at the beginning of this podcast. Go back if you're just fast forwarded. But in that, I said, okay, how does this fulfill my mission, my calling in life? So I worked with a coach. And the theme of Growth Time 2 has a spiritual element. There is a Coach G. There is a great life coach involved in our story. And that was a transformational part of my journey in the early 20s. But in that, Coach G, Coach God, let's call it, and Team God, I felt like I leaned into that in my life and leaned into that faith and getting coaching and hearing from the voice of growth or the voice of God on what those next steps would look like. So those became, I'd say, two kind of pivotal moments where I could see in my career growth that were valuable, that kept me forward facing and getting greater clarity of what my next step or how to improve or how to grow.
So, Coach Q, your book is Growth Time. And I always kid John that the first person you got to lead is yourself. And as leaders, we sometimes forget that. So I'm curious with that theme of growth time, because I encourage people to have an intentional personal growth plan. Tell us about some of the things you do on a daily basis, some habits or things that you would encourage leaders to do. Obviously, not everyone's adopting the same thing, but some things that you talked about the mission, and I agree with the foundation piece. What are some of the things that you do that you think has helped you lead yourself so you can lead others more effectively?
Yeah, Jim, self-management, right? The self-management of ourselves is our biggest challenge in life. We're high maintenance people. We take a lot. We keep a lot. We're like these high-end computers that constantly get bugs and viruses and break down. So the self-management, and it's powerful because it's something I condense a lot of my experience with in the third section of Growth Time called The Power of Personal Liberty. And self-management is at the core about how do we have freedom to be ourselves and be our best authentic self and get past what I coined the hypocrite monster, the beast within that we do what we don't want to do and we say what we don't want to say and we wrestle against our own values. So self-management for me has been a journey, and I look at it from a three-dimensional level. And if you're watching, you're a basketball player, you know it's a beautiful sign when you hold up the three ball, right? So you hold up your three ball. So I look at my growth and my shortcomings and my opportunities and how to keep me on track through three dimensions. And the outer layer of us as a person is our physical well-being. So I have become and love to be a fitness holic. Like I'm an avid person that when you train hard, you work out hard, you develop a stronger mindset and you develop a stronger belief, you develop a stronger confidence. So physical activity is usually where I start my day. At this point in my life, I'm an early riser. I'm up by 5. I take a great brand I actually coach for quite a bit, Burn Boot Camp, and I go there and I train for 45 minutes. It's a hard camp. We work out, and that kind of is a starting point. So there's a space where wherever your season is and wherever on the call, take a step towards that. If you want to see growth in your confidence today, go work out harder than where you currently are at the moment. So if you're not working out, just do something. But that's a great starting point. The outer shell, that's one dimensional. Being second dimensional is what I call your soul, and that's working through your mind, your will, and your emotions. So that's a centering part. What are you feeding your mindset with? Mindset changes behavior. What are you listening to? Whether I know, Coach Jim, you're a huge podcast fan. Some people are learners. Some people learn, like the next generation, they just need to get on TikTok and watch some videos. And there's a bad rap to that. But if they're watching things that are building, encouraging their mind up or helping them develop as people or as leaders, they're feeding their mindset. So feeding that is a huge part of my start today to the journey. I'll either listen to a podcast or I'll just get my mind as I drive back and forth from the gym. So you have that layer, okay? The third layer is what I call the inner part. This is the hard part, like the inner part, the spiritual core of our being. What is our growth plan or growth experience for our spiritual growth? So it's probably one of the most uncoached to places in the coaching industry. And the coaching industry will work ad nauseum to work through coaching the whole being as a person. But when the spiritual component comes up, it's like, whoa, wait, whoa, you lost me. We can't go there. That's forbidden tattoo territory. The unexplored is what coaches do. We explore the unexplored so we can get clarity, so we can get growth. So the spiritual journey becomes part of my life too. So whether it's prayer, I'm definitely a devoted Bible reader in terms of getting that into my thought and mind and getting my heart aligned with it. So I think there's three levels that goes into self-managing yourself. And Jim, as you all know, you can write some good thoughts and theories in life, but dang it, living them out is the hardest part because we have to all live them out. So I could package something which I think the growth time journey is God inspired to help the next generation, but dang it, I got to show up each day and do it too. And it's almost an accountability tool. You wrote it, like you believed it. Are you going to live it out today? How are you going to lead? How are you going to step up and live through limiting empowering beliefs? And what else are you challenging yourself with? So the questions you're challenging people with, they challenge you, they challenge me. And it's okay, do I step up into my own growth time or do I just say that's good for you? And I'm bent on not being a hypocrite. So if it challenges, challenge. If it grows, and if it's my message or my tools, live it out.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great point. And before John asks this question, I got to mention, because I'm big, done a lot of studying of habits, because for myself and then to try to help others. And interesting, one thing that I think is something I've done very well for most of my life is a keystone habit, and that is exercise. And I'm right with you. I exercise every day unless I have some really situation where I can't do it. So if there's 365, I exercise probably at least 362. But what it happens is that is part of my identity, and it really augments the other things. And then the last thing I'll say is I really coach people on coming up with, I love your thing, and for me, it's spiritual, mental, and physical. I exercise the physical, mental is how I feed my mind, and spiritual is my meditation, my prayer. But I encourage people in those dimensions to make a daily non-negotiable. And I'll give you a quick example. One would be exercise for this, for the physical. The mental is that I listen to a certain amount or read every single day. I have a specific goal for that. And then the spiritual is I pray and I also meditate every day. Now, I think we gotta start small, but starting to develop those daily non-negotiables, I think has helped me immensely. So I thought your answer was really powerful.
That brings up a thought, Jim, real quick. I'm thinking about habits of highly successful people.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I just coached a client through this recently, and it's called the Midnight Mirror.
Okay.
The Midnight Mirror, because we talked about, John, you asked earlier about, man, how do you step up to big moments, right? How do you lead through adversity? And I said it's about preparation. I noticed in my life story, and I coach through this, that the next day starts the night before you go to bed. Because when you go to bed, if you're thinking, oh, here's tomorrow, next day comes, what is it going to look like? If you're all in a realm with that, you're not hopeful and confident about the next day. And
Right.
then those emotions, interesting, I've noticed, carry over to how you wake up.
Oh,
And
definitely.
so the midnight mirror becomes like your place of reflection. And it's a client I've coached for quite a bit, but he's grabbed a hold of this recently. And it's really impacting to a transformational degree how his day's going, what's setting him up for his growth and success. But it's a reflection point, and you're reflecting on, you're resolving any issues that you couldn't get clear on during the day. You're bringing closure to the day, and you're reflecting and you're letting go, you're releasing. So you're reflecting on the day, what worked, what didn't work. You're releasing frustrations, disappointments, things that didn't go your way. If you've been offended or hurt by somebody, you're releasing them. And then you're envisioning what tomorrow could look like. You're already thinking about your mind how you're going to step into the next day with confidence. And so those kind of things, the reflection of the midnight mirror, are powerful. And I also say the hard part about that is it's if you realize and reflected during the day that you screwed something up or you were acted like a jerk or you missed the mark, next day, how do you go own that and make it right? Because that gets a clear conscience and that builds confidence. And so I think the preparation part, going back to what you're saying, John, and just weaving through how this conversation is going, adds a lot to how you manage yourself and how you show up each day. Is it starts the night before, your midnight mirror, and how you reflect
Yeah.
when it's just you.
Yeah, it's the bookends of the day as we talk about. The beginning and end are so important. And you already answered this question, but I have to ask it point blank because I know it's an important piece. And before we wrap up, is your faith and how important that is to you and your spiritual journey. You're a person of faith as well as Coach and I are too. Tell us how that has impacted your journey, especially recently, and your spiritual journey a bit.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think my growth story really started to elevate in my early 20s. And it was interesting. I got challenged with a question I didn't know the answer to. So you think about questions that challenge us. And I just wrote an article or a blog about thought disruptors. And a thought disruptor is something that disrupts our normal pattern of thinking. And it challenges us outside our boxes that we typically live in. In my early 20s, I got a thought disruptor. And it challenged me at a place where I didn't know, and that bothered me. So sometimes thought disruptors challenge us and we want to ignore it and not deal with it. We all know that's not a recipe for growth and that's not a recipe for success. So no matter how big that thought disruptor, if we're not willing to entertain it, then we're going to stay stuck in a certain area or space of our lives. So for me, John, in my early 20s, I was playing basketball, professional basketball, and my roommate that came through was a Christian. And I'd grown up with a sense of God, but there was no real kind of like part where it was a mainstay of our life or the way we lived or the way we went about our being. It was conceptually there, but there was nothing like really real. It was cultural, let's call it. Like I had a cultural belief that there was a higher power, a God. So he asked me a question one day on the road, and he goes, "Hey, where are you with your life, with your relationship with Jesus?" And I'm a quick-witted dude, and I took a sales route in professional world. I said, "Oh man, you know what? I got a lot of stuff going on. I'm gonna get to that later in life." And he goes, "Oh, okay." He said, "I'll give you a thought. Is if you get that relationship, everything else will fall into place." And that was the conversation. But it hit me at a core was like, I don't know what I believe. I don't know what I believe about that. At that point, I was definitely searching and longing for something, and I thought it was success and achievement and accomplishment and validation, performance, being validated. I thought that's the path of manhood that was defined for me. And that challenged me at a level I didn't know, and that bothered me. And so in that journey, I started to research it, look into it. I was a biology major, very logical. At that point, I probably would have told you Darwinism and evolution was it. Even though it's theory, I probably bought into or was taught like it was factual. But in that space, I started to search it out and I came to some conclusions. And then I had a really transformational moment that God became real in my life. And that transformational moment, I went and told my dad I loved him, I forgave him. We had a very rocky relationship. And I told him I loved him, I forgave him. And I said, I want to pursue a relationship with you. And
Wow.
it's because I feel like I've been forgiven by Jesus that I can forgive and I want to move forward together. And that moment, then, as I left that conversation, I just felt freedom and a release. And I knew what I experienced personally at that moment wasn't just an emotional experience, it was like peace and power came into my life. And once you experience that kind of level of peace and power, it's kind of like going from high school to college basketball to pros. Once you experience a level of it, it was like I'm all in. I'm all in. Like whatever the cost is, I'll be a God chaser. And so that became like very transformational in my story. But it came through someone giving me a powerful question and me going, okay, that's a thought disruptor. I need more clarity on that. And I'm not moving away from that. I'm moving towards it. So if you're
Wow.
on the call and you're like, man, this got deep really quick, this got, wow, really unique quick, that expedited my growth as a person, as a leader. I became more open to growth. I became less restrictive. I wasn't combative in myself with it. I became open to growth at a capacity that I never was before. So in your story, if you're unclear on that, you're listening, highly encourage you. Hey, go explore it. Go learn. See what spiritual growth looks like for your story. Uncomfortable, yes. Is it going to be challenging? Yes. Do you maybe make some changes in your life? That's part of growth, baby. It's growth time.
Well said. Very powerful. Thanks for sharing, Coach Q. I apologize because I got to flip with one last question that's completely off what you were just talking, but I'm just curious, and it's my last question, and then John will wrap up for the show. But as this recording, before we saw Indiana win the national championship in football. And to me, being a coach for a long time, studying leadership, and I know you study leadership extensively, I'm just curious, can you zero in your opinion to help the people listening? What was Kurt's Signetti? One or two things, because we could have a laundry list of things you observed that because what he did in 2 years, people are criticizing because he has older players. He had 8 4-star players. Alabama had 53 4 and 5 stars on their roster, and they won 38-3. So it was more than older players. He turned a 2-star guy to he's going to be the #1 pick in the draft. So there's some amazing things he did, and I don't know the guy at all. I just know what he did in 2 years is what the most remarkable. Indiana had the second most losses in Division I football history. So I'm rambling here, so let's get to you. What are your thoughts? A couple keys that you think that he was able to do.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. And the theme I can hear a little bit is the preparation before the moment. I'm quite confident that Coach had prepared himself through his home growth story to be ready for this opportunity that's ready this moment. And he refined his skill and he grew in leadership. What you'll typically hear is culture. What a buzzword, right? You hear culture. And it leaves everything nondescript. Oh, culture. What's culture? How do I grab culture? Yeah, of course I hear that. Culture. What I've seen the best do, and I've just coached a group of business owners through this thought. How do you create an accountable culture? My strong belief is when I saw them execute at a high level each of their roles and responsibilities, on top of like the vision and the connection point and the relationships, my intuition, the way he comes across, is that he built an accountable culture. He built accountability. And that's unclear to a lot of people how you build an accountability culture and what good ability accountable cultures are and aren't. That's probably a whole separate podcast we can coach through, in essence, right? How to build an accountable culture. But that would be the key mark I know he bought into and believed in and got his team rallied around. And when that's in place in a culture, all things are possible. There's an alignment, right? And you go back to our AAA, there's an alignment, there's an attitude, there's a mindset, and then there's specific actions. And you create this sense of ownership that, man, they were awesome to watch. My only regret is Mendoza is not going to my favorite Pittsburgh Steelers team. He's ending up as a Raider. I think it's travesty. Somehow I wish we had enough draft picks to get the dude. I love his disposition. He's always camera ready, like he prepares the night before for what Mendoza's going to say. I mean, it's just fire. But what a fantastic story. And what a semblance of leadership that he exhibited. Yeah, powerful.
Truly amazing. Good thoughts, Coach Q. I've certainly learned a lot from you today. One of the key takeaways that I want to reiterate for our audience too is that I wrongfully asked the question. I asked you that since leadership begins in that big moment, what do you do? But your answers have shown some light to me that leadership doesn't begin in big moments. It begins with preparation long before those big moments. So that's a really important takeaway. Also, when you break down, you know what to do now. Call AAA. That's a really powerful acronym, and I love how you brought that to life. So we can't thank you enough for the time that you've spent with us. Tell us, if we want more Coach Q, if we want our growth time, how can we get the book? How can we learn more about you and connect with you for coaching?
The growth time, I think it's powerful. Grab it on Amazon. Growth time, the clear path to unlock your best life and leadership. Grab it on Amazon. But a meaningful way for, if you're listening, you've made it this far, don't come this far just to come this far, because the best is about to be said. And so the best is actually how it's going to help you. And so in that, this is an audience that are professionals. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Quinn Harwood, right? You'll see it there, Coach Q. Connect with me on LinkedIn. That will automatically trigger a subscription to what I call Monday Movers Mindset. I send it out through email, but I want you to connect through that. It's free coaching. This generation, you're listening, my millennial peeps and fams, get connected to coaching that will shift and change your mindset, that'll change your behavior, that will empower you to move the mission God called and created you to go do. So connect with me on LinkedIn. Even send me a DM through LinkedIn saying where you heard or how you connect with me. I'd love to hear your story and what pain point you're wrestling with right now as a leader. I'll give you free coaching advice. I want to support you. But number one, just connect through LinkedIn. Go ahead and connect with me. You'll automatically be triggered to Monday Movers Mindset. Monday is for movers. It's the day to move your mission. So that would be the most powerful way to connect with me, John.
It sounds like the most powerful way to start the week, too. Coach Q, we can't thank you enough again for your time. Quinn Harwood, connect on LinkedIn. Also grab the book, Growth Time, links down in the show notes. Thank you, Coach, for your time today, and really appreciate all the insights you brought.
Thanks, John. And I will leave on one last thought. Hey, confidence is key. And if you're on this, know that your best is ahead. Your best is ahead. No matter what you've been through, your best is ahead. God's best is ahead for you. You are gifted to be an impactful leader. This generation needs it. You need it. I'm excited to hear it. Send me a note. Let me hear about your growth.